and thank you for joining us for the second installment of the Fantasy Film Festival. I'm your host, Mick Garris. Here on the Fantasy Film Festival, we're trying to salute the imaginative side of Hollywood and the world film industry by presenting the best science fiction, fantasy, and horror films we can get our hands on. Sometimes these come from the most unlikely places. Tonight's feature is just one of those, Piranha, intended as a low-budget exploitation film from Roger Corman's New World Pictures to capitalize on the success of Jaws. With us in the studio, we have one of the stars of Piranha, everyone's favorite vampire, Barbara Steele, the director of the picture, Joe Dante.
Nobody's favorite vampire.
That's right. And Paul Bartel, who was also in the film and is a director in his own right. He directed Death Race 2000, also for New World. We'll start with you, Barbara. How did you become involved in the picture?
Oh, well, I really don't know. Joe asked me to be in it. It's that simple.
Pretty
Bought
much,
me three
pretty much
martinis.
covers it.
I said
right.
yes. Right, but actually I really wanted to play the Mad Doctor.
That's true. That's
I
true.
did, I
yes,
did.
Barbara was really hot to play Dr. Hoke, the Kevin McCarthy part. And since Dr. Hoke was frequently being beaten up by Bradford Dillman, we thought that might make the hero unsympathetic.
And I'm just dying to play a victim. I'm so exhausted by playing these sort of evil, predatory women. So if anyone wants to give me a victim role.
I'll give you a victim role. You're the victim of my questions. How much of your career has been, or much of your career has been devoted to the fantasy field? Has that been by choice? Do you like being involved in this?
Everything
genre?
depends upon who you're working with. You know, once you're making a film, you're making a film. And most of the so-called fantasy films I made were made in Europe, in genuine locations, and that was in Italy, most particularly in Italy. And that was very hypnotic and intriguing and spooky, because, you know, I crawled around in a lot of crypts, and I have a very ambivalent feelings about, you know, vomiting ketchup on somebody else's grave. But, but I loved working with the Italians. Mwah.
That's right. Joe, how did the film come to be? After you say, I want to read an exhibitor tip here.
Actually, if you read the exhibitor tip now, it'll probably put the film in firm perspective.
This is sent out by New World to the theater owners and how to exploit the film. Create some exciting pre-publicity by leaving dead piranha at various strategic locations along the banks of your local lakes and streams. Promote community interest and fear by organizing groups to guard against the coming onslaught. Give enterprising kids in your area a few bucks to make themselves scarce for a couple of days and watch the grosses soar.
I think the picture firmly captures that spirit.
Right.
It was unusual for Roger in that Piranha was not a project that he initiated. He's very strong on doing his own ideas with his own money. When some of the money comes from somewhere else, however, he's a little more conducive to doing something different. So Jeff Sheckman, the executive producer, came to Roger with this idea, which he had been taking around town since Jaws came out, frankly. I mean, it's indeed a ripoff of Jaws. There's no getting around it. And Roger, because UA had the foreign distribution rights and put up half the money, Roger said, fine, go ahead. And we shot it in Texas last March for 22 days, and it came in costing about $650,000, which is something less than Jaws 2.
Yes, which was between 20 and 25 million, if I'm not mistaken. Paul, I'd like to get your ideas on which you prefer, acting or directing.
Well, I prefer directing because my main interest is in telling stories, and you have more control when you're directing the picture than when you're simply acting in it. However, I think that acting keeps you supple, keeps you in touch with the directors, that is, keeps you as a director in touch with the actor's problems. And besides, one of the nice things about New World Pictures is that everybody gets to do everything. Right. Joe has acted in a couple of films that I've directed. I've acted in a couple of films that Joe has directed, or one that he's directed and one that he's co-directed. I cut a sequence in a film that I acted in, and so Alan Arkish directed recently.
Rock and Roll High School.
Exactly. That's one of the things that makes Roger Corman's operation unique is
Learn
that,
by doing.
An incestuous company.
and that people get a chance to do so many different things and work with their friends. Mike Nichols once said that the best way to get ahead in this business is to work with your friends.
Right.
And that's what you get to do at New World.
And also within a certain framework, a certain very commercial framework, there is a great deal of freedom in some ways in working for Roger, in that once you have satisfied the basic market requirements of putting X gallons of blood and X, bared breasts and fight scenes and car crashes or whatever, you're fairly well left alone to do pretty much what you want. And I don't think that this particular picture would have probably ended up having as much humor in it had it been made maybe for some other company.
Right. Barbara, you worked for Roger Corman in Pit and the Pendulum. Why don't you tell me a little about your experiences with him on that?
Well, that's so long ago, and I was so fragile and inexperienced at the time that I really haven't got an objective feeling. Roger seemed to me that he was a sort of this very quiet man in the background. He doesn't involve himself very much with the actors. He's extremely polite and profoundly shy, I think, with his actors and being intimate with his actors. But always very civilized and very nice. And so my main relationship on that film was with Vincent Price, who was very supportive and charming. Yeah.
Now, you've worked all over the world. You've worked a lot in Europe, in Canada. You've worked here in the States. How was your experience working in San Marcos, Texas, on Piranha?
Well, I had a terrific time. I mean, I had a fabulous time because Joe was fantastic to work with, and so was John. They were incredible. John Davison, the producer, they were incredible under this excruciating stress. I mean, when I saw the film, I couldn't believe how phenomenal it looked and how the craftsmanship. It just is fantastic. And they were so easy and warm and supportive, and I thought I was, back in Europe. And everybody seemed to have a good time, and nobody collapsed, and nobody was bitchy. I couldn't believe it, especially as the year before that. I'd just done Pretty Baby, which was just an absolute nightmare in terms of hostility and stress and etc. on the set.
Okay. Right now, there are headlines in the newspapers about a similar circumstance to the plot line of the movie. Paul, why don't you tell us about that? We just heard about this.
This was really miraculous. If I didn't know better, I would have suspected Roger of arranging this to facilitate the distribution of the picture. Apparently, somewhere in Florida, some guy was fishing and came up with a fish that he had never seen before, and took it to the local game warden for identification, and was told that they had never seen it either, and they took it to a university, probably the University of Florida, and it was identified as a piranha. And there's all kinds of speculation about how piranhas could possibly be living in a lake in Florida. The speculation is that somebody dumped out their pet piranhas, which I think are illegal in the United States. It's not legal to own them as pets, although a lot of pet stores have been selling them under the table because, like man-eating plants, they're very popular.
What does
Black
they feed
market.
Piranhas, apart from little toes? No, what do they feed piranhas as a pet?
Hamburger? Children.
Hamsters?
Right. Youngest sons.
Firstborn.
And now they're reaching out into the tributaries of...
Well, that's what people are wondering, whether they've gotten into the streams that connect with this fishing hole.
We had nothing to
Okay.
do with this.
The most terrible thing I've heard that you can work with as a director, Joe, are dogs, kids, and water. You worked with all three of them together. Tell me about
Well, the dogs and the kids, the dogs are fine, the dog was wonderful, the kids are fine, but the water is real grim. A lot of the picture was shot in lakes and rivers where there are houses every 5 feet, and we're supposed to make it look like it's an isolated river, so you have to keep cutting little pieces out when the houses go by in the background. And the rest of it was shot in the Olympic swimming pool in L.A., which we dumped gallons and gallons of Caro syrup into to make it look like blood, and we created a horrible fungus, which they apparently had to have people from Sacramento, no, really, come down,
No.
really, to try
When
to
are we
kill
going
it.
to shoot this?
And the Olympic swimming team apparently must have missed a lot of practice, so if they lost this year, no.
Listen, let me throw something in here, because when this picture started shooting, Joe did not know how to swim. And the prospect of
I
making
knew how to swim. I just didn't like to swim. And I still don't like to swim.
Well, didn't it take you some time to
It
get
took me
used
some
to
time to get used to the cold water, and I still have chapped lips and an earache.
Let's get acquainted with a couple friends you brought along here. This is one of the co-stars of the film. Can you get a shot of that? Oops. And
Well,
this is another co-star of
Look,
the
he's
film.
crippled.
Oh.
He hasn't recovered from
He
this
hasn't.
shooting.
He's been very ill. As you can see, he looks ill. He's been being used as a stand-in on Star Wars 2, and he's gotten really sort of grunged up. But this was designed by
Moving
Phil
parts.
Tippett. It's a stop-motion whatchamacallit, which we used in a sequence in the picture where it perhaps was not called for in the script, but nonetheless we felt that it would add a certain light tone to the rest of the picture, which would be beneficial.
He's bandaged here. He's,
He looks like an iguana. Does he lay eggs? No.
Well, not that I saw, but then I haven't been
Knife of the
looking. Phil did a remarkable job animating him stop frame.
Explain how that's done. because-
Well, you move it this much and take a shot, and this much and take a shot, and the sophistication is mainly in the lighting, which is very important, and the number of movements that you can do and not knock him over and have to start over. This is one of the rubber fish that we had designed for the film. We had given some thought to using real piranhas, which I quickly put a kibosh on. And we used these and shot them very fast, at like 9 frames a second, and got a fairly pleasing impressionistic impression.
much of the special effects crew was from Star Wars. How did you go?
Well,
about this?
Phil Tippett, who designed the creature, and John Berg, who was in charge of the effects, had both worked on Star Wars 1, and John Davison and I initially had envisioned doing all the sequences with the piranha in stop motion, which would have been hugely expensive, and we would still be working on it if we had done it that way. We eventually settled for this way, which was actually found simply through magic, because when we started the film, it was such a rush that we never had a chance to do any effects tests. So we were shooting things underwater in the swimming pool and then going to MGM in the morning and looking at the rushes, and they were no good, and we would have to go back and try to do something else. And it's astonishing to all of us that it managed to work out, and it's a testament to Phil and John and the other people who worked.
Okay, we've been talking with Barbara Steele, Joe Dante, and Paul Bartel. Please stay tuned to watch what we've been talking about, Piranha. Thank you for joining us, and hope to see you next time.